It started with a voice, trembling, off-screen. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Now." The camera shook slightly, capturing a man. Older, unassuming, dressed in a faded gray blazer, standing awkwardly in the glowing glass foyer of the most anticipated AI summit of the year. The caption on the trending video read, "Old guy tries sneaking into Elon Musk's private event, gets caught and humiliated." The footage showed him being blocked by two suited guards, each towering over him, their earpieces blinking like warning signs. The man didn't argue. He didn't resist. He simply nodded, stepped back, and said something no one could quite hear. A voice from the crowd, cocky and loud, shouted, "Boomer alert!" and laughter erupted like wildfire. But what the video didn't capture, at least not yet, was the name of that man. Because within 24 hours, the world would know exactly who he was, and the people who laughed would be stunned into silence. John Kennedy, a United States Senator, had never cared for spectacle. He didn't walk with a team of handlers or dress in a way that screamed power. He believed in showing up, not showing off. That day, he arrived alone at the International Summit on Ethics and Artificial Intelligence, held inside a tech cathedral funded by Elon Musk himself. The invitation had come not from Musk or any corporate elite, but from a 19-year-old robotics student named Alana Park, who had met Kennedy during a youth outreach program years ago. She'd written to him personally, saying she admired how he actually listened, and asked if he would attend as her guest to hear her speak. Kennedy said yes, without hesitation. But what he didn't know was that her email had never made it through the summit's AI-managed guest filter. His name wasn't on the list. The moment he walked toward the entrance, a wall of glass and steel shimmered in front of him, like some sci-fi threshold. A young man in a headset glanced at a tablet and shook his head. "I'm sorry, sir. This is a restricted event. We can't let you in without digital verification." Kennedy smiled gently. "I understand, but I was invited. I'm supposed to meet someone inside." The guard didn't lift his eyes. "I'm going to need to ask you to move aside, sir." And then, the moment everything changed, Elon Musk himself strode past, trailed by a convoy of assistants, bodyguards, and flashbulbs. He spotted the confusion, paused, and turned toward the commotion. One of the guards leaned in and whispered. Elon glanced at Kennedy for half a second, didn't recognize him, and smirked. "It's okay," he said loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "Let the grandpa go home. A eye's not for everyone." There was laughter. Someone clapped. Kennedy said nothing. Not because he didn't have words, but because the words didn't matter. Not yet. Across the plaza, behind a glowing interactive wall of neural interfaces and product demos, a young girl with glasses pulled out her phone. She had been watching from afar, her eyes narrowing as the crowd dismissed the old man like a confused tourist. Her name was Alana. She didn't know he had shown up. She didn't know the guards had denied him. But the moment she saw Elon's smirk and heard the crowd laugh, something in her snapped. She hit record. Sometimes the truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs someone to witness it. And if you're still watching this story right now, you've already seen the moment the tide begins to turn. If your heart is beating a little faster, if you've ever seen someone kind get dismissed for not looking the part, then maybe this is the time to pause and ask, what would you have done? If you believe this story needs to be heard, if you believe that respect shouldn't depend on status, hit that like button and comment the number 9 so the algorithm knows this story matters. Because that's not just an old man, that's John Kennedy. And by the time the world finds out, it won't just be a clip on your feed, it'll be a lesson none of us will forget. The morning after the incident, the video had already surpassed 2 million views. It had no filters, no edits, no music, just raw footage of an old man being told to leave, his identity dismissed, his dignity trampled. The comment section was split in two. Some mocked, calling it just another old guy getting lost at a tech event. But others paused, rewound, and started to ask, wait, is that Senator John Kennedy? By noon, the question had turned into confirmation. A political journalist posted a side-by-side photo, tagging the video. Confirmed. That old guy was a U.S. senator. He was invited, and they kicked him out. Elon even laughed. The internet shifted gears. Memes faded. Outrage took their place. Hashtags erupted. Respect elders, Gangwekaj Elon shamed, and most powerfully, Tort, that was Kennedy. Back in Louisiana, Kennedy sat alone in his office, his phone buzzing non-stop. He hadn't seen the video yet. He didn't need to. He'd felt every second of it in his bones the night before. The condescension, the glances, the laughter, the cold authority of people who believed they'd never have to say sorry. His assistant rushed in, pale, eyes wide. "Sir, it's everywhere. You're trending. The footage. Elon's comment. The student who invited you. She posted a follow-up." Kennedy took a deep breath. "How bad is it?" She paused. "It's not bad. It's powerful." Across the country, Alana sat at her dorm desk, heart pounding. She hadn't slept. After posting the clip, she'd gone through every comment, every share, every dueling opinion. But what made her hand tremble was the realization that her small act, filming a moment most people would have walked past, was now shaking the biggest name in tech. She uploaded a new video. In it, she looked directly into the camera and said, "The man in that video is Senator John Kennedy. I invited him. He showed up for me, and they turned him away like he was nothing. I'm not letting that go." The internet didn't either. That afternoon, Elon Musk tweeted, "Didn't know who he was. Shouldn't have joked. Hope he's okay." It was too little. Too late. Screenshots of his smirk flooded social media. Commentary poured in, not just from activists or pundits, but from regular people, engineers, teachers, even elderly veterans, sharing their own stories of being dismissed because of how they looked or how old they were. The event organizers scrambled to do damage control, offering a formal apology to Kennedy. But the public was watching now, and apologies crafted in boardrooms didn't sound like justice. Then came the twist no one saw coming. A second video leaked. This time it wasn't from Alana. It came from a member of the event's backstage tech crew. In it, you could see Elon Musk talking to an aide shortly after the incident. His words were muffled but clear enough. "Why are these nobodies showing up to my summit? If they don't code or fund, get rid of them." The audio was damning. The nobody was now everybody. The damage had gone nuclear. News anchors picked it up like wildfire. The story was no longer about a senator. It was about respect, about who gets to be included in the future and who gets ignored. It wasn't political, it was personal, because every viewer, young or old, had once felt invisible. And now they had a face for that feeling. John Kennedy, standing silently as the door closed in front of him. And through it all, Kennedy said nothing. Not out of fear, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. He knew when to speak, and when silence could speak louder. But that silence wouldn't last, because when he finally did open his mouth, the world would be ready to listen. So if you're still here, still watching this unfold, ask yourself, have you ever been overlooked for not fitting someone else's definition of belonging? Have you ever seen someone dismissed, not for what they did, but for what they didn't look like? Then stay with us, because what comes next isn't just another headline. It's a reckoning, and it's only just begun. 3 days after the incident, the world no longer saw Senator John Kennedy as just a politician. He had become a symbol of dignity, of restraint, of what it meant to endure public humiliation without bitterness. But while the internet kept buzzing, Kennedy had remained quiet. No press conference, no tweets, no public statement, just silence. Until now. That morning, Kennedy walked into a modest radio studio in Baton Rouge. The producer offered to prep him, to run talking points, to suggest language that polls well. Kennedy shook his head. "I'm not here to spin anything," he said calmly. "I'm here to tell the truth." The microphone turned red. The host leaned in. "Senator," he began, "the nation's been watching this story explode. But you haven't said a word. Why?" Kennedy took a breath, leaned forward, and in a tone so measured it cut through the static like a scalpel, he answered, "Because this story was never about me. It was about how we treat people when we think no one's watching." He spoke without notes, without bitterness, without an ounce of political posturing. "When I was turned away from that event," he said, "I didn't feel angry. I felt forgotten. I felt invisible. And if someone with a title, with a voice, could be made to feel that way, imagine what happens to people every day who don't wear a name tag that matters to the powerful." The radio lines lit up. Calls poured in. A veteran said he'd cried watching the clip. A teacher said her elderly father stopped going to tech stores because people treated him like he was in the way. Another caller simply said, "Thank you for not yelling back." The clip of Kennedy's interview spread faster than the original video. News anchors replayed his quote over and over. "Respect doesn't come from algorithms. It comes from how you treat people when you think they're no one." Influencers shared it. Podcasters dissected it. Even brands began quoting it. Some earnestly, others awkwardly trying to join the wave. But the tide wasn't driven by corporations. It was led by ordinary people who saw in Kennedy's quiet strength a reflection of their own quiet wounds. Meanwhile, Elon Musk, usually so loud online, had gone curiously quiet. His PR team was in overdrive, trying to distance him from the leaked audio. But the damage was done. Tech journalists ran exposés on exclusion culture at industry events. Thought pieces titled, "The Future Has a Gatekeeper Problem," flooded Medium and Substack. A trending video montage titled, "He Called Him a Nobody," spliced Kennedy's silent walk away from the event with footage of other public figures who had been underestimated before changing the world. The narrative had turned. And it wasn't turning back. But then came the most unexpected twist of all. Late that evening, Elon Musk posted a video. Not a tweet, not a thread. A full, unedited video. He sat alone. No assistants, no branding behind him. His face was pale, his voice unusually subdued. "I made a mistake," he began. "I dismissed someone I didn't recognize. I joked when I should have listened. And I reinforced something that hurts people far beyond that one moment." He paused. "Senator Kennedy, I don't expect forgiveness, but I do offer an invitation for a real conversation. Not on a stage, not in a studio, just man to man." The response was electric. Comments poured in, some praising Elon's vulnerability, others skeptical, still others demanding more than words. But something had shifted. The man who once laughed on camera was now clearly shaken. The man who was laughed at had become the one who set the tone for the national conversation. And what did Kennedy do? He didn't reply with a viral post. He didn't release a slick video. He sent a letter, handwritten, and Alana, the student who invited him, read it aloud on her live stream. "Elon," it said, "I accept your invitation. Not for me, but for the kids like Alana, for the veterans, for the folks who get turned away without a second glance. I'll talk, if you're ready to listen." Alana's hands trembled as she folded the letter. Her voice cracked when she said, "This is bigger than tech. This is about being human again." Her stream hit 2 million viewers overnight. Major networks requested the letter, hashtags reignited. And in that moment, something powerful happened. This wasn't just a story of a man wronged and a man humbled. It was the beginning of a bridge. between the future we build and the people we often leave behind while building it. So if you're still here, if you've felt the sting of being underestimated, of being ignored in a world obsessed with speed and screens, then drop a comment. Not just to say you watched, but to say you see, because that's how movements begin, not with outrage, but with recognition. And sometimes it starts with one man walking away and the world finally turning to ask why. The meeting wasn't streamed. There were no microphones, no press, no PR teams crafting every word. Just a quiet rooftop in downtown Austin overlooking a skyline built by ambition, and two men seated on opposite sides of a weathered wooden table. One had built rockets, rewired global finance, and ignited a digital revolution. The other had spent decades listening to people who felt forgotten by all of that. Elon Musk, usually the loudest voice in any room, sat quieter than he'd ever been. Senator John Kennedy, the man he once dismissed with a smirk, now met his gaze with calm, unwavering eyes. The conversation started stiff, almost formal. Musk offered a strained apology, repeating what he'd said in the video. Kennedy nodded, listened, didn't interrupt. But when Elon began to explain how fast things move, how hard it is to verify identities in real time, Kennedy raised a hand and finally spoke. "It's not about fast," he said. "It's about basic decency. It doesn't take AI to know when you're being disrespectful." The sentence hit harder than Elon expected. And for once, he didn't argue. He just looked away. What followed was not a confrontation. It was a reckoning. Kennedy didn't yell. He didn't grandstand. He told stories. Of a teacher who wrote him after the video went viral, saying she'd been passed over for tech training because her time had passed. Of a mechanic who once got locked out of his bank app and was told by a chatbot to try restarting life. Of a grandmother who tried to join a virtual town hall and was told, by an automated voice, that her request did not meet format criteria. Kennedy's voice didn't tremble. It wasn't theatrical. It was precise, like a scalpel cutting through a narrative that had grown too thick with ego. Elon listened. And then, slowly, he started to open up. He admitted that the industry had become too addicted to metrics, to velocity, to innovation for innovation's sake. "We're optimizing everything," he said, "except for how people feel." For a moment, it wasn't billionaire versus senator. It was just two men, both burdened by the systems they had helped shape, one through action, the other through oversight. And somewhere in that stillness, a moment of honesty emerged. Elon leaned forward, elbows on the table, and asked, "How do we fix this?" Kennedy didn't answer right away. He looked out over the skyline, the city pulsing with neon and noise, and finally said, "You build bridges, not just bandwidth, and you start by listening to people who don't speak in code." It was the kind of line that would have sounded rehearsed in anyone else's mouth, but from Kennedy, it landed like truth. They sat in silence after that. Not awkward, not strained. Just quiet. Two men thinking, not about their image, but their impact. The following morning, Kennedy's office released a single photo, no caption, no press release. It showed him and Elon shaking hands on that rooftop, the city behind them. The tension dissolved but not forgotten. The image went viral, but not for the reasons people expected. It wasn't triumph or defeat. It was something rarer, accountability meeting grace. But the real shift came days later, when Elon's team announced a sweeping policy change across all of his companies. AI gatekeeping systems would be reprogrammed with one new directive: human override required when user identity is in question. It didn't sound revolutionary, but in a world ruled by automation, it was a radical return to human judgment. At the same time, Kennedy announced the launch of the Access with Dignity initiative, a nonpartisan effort aimed at ensuring no individual is dismissed from civic or corporate spaces due to age, attire, or digital status. The initiative would partner with tech companies, libraries, and universities to create protocols for more humane verification and engagement. And at the heart of the campaign was a face, Kennedy's, and a phrase, "No one should need a title to be treated like a human being." Alana, the student who unknowingly triggered a national movement, was invited to speak at Stanford's Innovation Summit. Her message was clear. Progress without compassion is just momentum without meaning. She didn't need applause to validate it. The standing ovation came anyway. And yet, what stuck with people most wasn't the summit or the handshake. It was something Kennedy said in a podcast later that week. When asked how he felt about the whole ordeal, he replied, "Embarrassed. But not because they mistook me. Because I didn't speak up sooner. I thought silence was strength. But sometimes silence just gives ignorance more room to grow." So now, if you're watching this and still wondering what this all means, why it mattered that a man got turned away from a building, remember this. Sometimes the smallest cracks reveal the deepest faults. And sometimes all it takes is one moment of quiet injustice to wake an entire nation up. Have you ever seen someone dismissed just because they didn't fit? Did you say something? Did you wish you had? Share your story below. Let the world know we're not building a future for machines. We're building one for people, and people deserve to be seen. The summit hall was packed, yet the room felt still. Not quiet, just full of a kind of anticipation that made everyone sit straighter, breathe slower. This wasn't a tech convention or a political rally. It wasn't about launches, products, or platforms. This was something different, intimate, and raw. The banner behind the stage read, "Access with Dignity, where innovation meets humanity," and seated center stage, with no script and no teleprompter, was Senator John Kennedy. He adjusted the microphone slowly, like he was more comfortable speaking across a kitchen table than on a global stage. But when he spoke, the room leaned in. "You don't know you've been dehumanized until it happens so quietly, no one else notices," he began. "And when it does, there's this moment, about half a second long, when you question if maybe it was your fault. Maybe you weren't clear. Maybe you didn't belong. But let me tell you something. When someone robs you of your dignity, it's never your fault. And it's always your right to get it back." The words weren't delivered like a speech. They landed like lived truth. Kennedy paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Young, old, corporate, academic, dressed in sleek lanyards and vintage pins. It didn't matter. They were all just people who had, at one time or another, felt like they didn't count. He told the story again, not with drama, but with clarity. How he'd arrived alone at the tech summit. How he'd been brushed off, mocked, and publicly dismissed. How Elon Musk, with just one careless joke, had turned him into a punchline. But he didn't linger on that. Instead, he shifted the spotlight. What matters isn't that it happened to me. What matters is that it happens to people every single day. To the grandfather who can't get help at the self-checkout. To the veteran who can't navigate an automated phone system. To the kid who doesn't look like a coder, but could outbuild anyone in the room. Then came the moment that made headlines. Kennedy reached down and picked up a folded sheet of paper. "I want to read you something," he said. "It's a message I received 2 nights ago from someone I've never met." He unfolded the letter, smoothed it out, and began. "Dear Senator Kennedy, I'm 16 years old. I live in Detroit. My grandma was with me when we watched the video of what happened to you. She doesn't say much. She's old school. But when she saw the guard block you, she leaned forward and whispered, 'They don't see people like us anymore.' I didn't know what to say, but I promised her I'd see her more." The room was silent. Someone sniffled. Kennedy folded the letter back, then looked up. That's why I'm here. Not to make noise, but to help people feel seen again. Alana was sitting near the front row, her phone recording. She didn't need to live stream it. This moment would ripple across the internet on its own. Behind her, executives from tech giants sat side by side with public school teachers and community organizers, and when Kennedy finished, the applause wasn't thunderous. It was long, sustained. People didn't clap because they were told to. They clapped because something in them cracked open. But what happened next surprised everyone. From the side of the stage, Elon Musk walked out, not in a designer suit or flanked by a PR team, but in jeans and a wrinkled jacket. He didn't try to take the mic. He simply stood there, nodded at Kennedy, and sat down next to him. Kennedy turned, nodded back. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. The moderator stepped in gently. Senator Kennedy, before we close, if there's one thing you want this audience to remember, what would it be? Kennedy didn't pause. If the future's being built, make sure it has a front door everyone can walk through. Not a scanner, not a swipe code. A door, and someone on the other side who says, "Come in." The room erupted, but not in chaos. It was warmth, relief, recognition, and if you're still with us, watching, reading, listening, ask yourself, what kind of world are we building? Is it faster? Smarter? More efficient? Sure. But is it kinder? Is it human? If you've ever been turned away because you looked too old, too different, too poor, too quiet, drop a comment below. Share your story. Let the algorithms hear your voice. Because stories like this don't end on a stage. They begin again every time someone chooses respect over ridicule. This isn't just about Kennedy anymore. It's about all of us. And whether the world we're building makes room for everyone, or just the ones holding the keys. The next morning, the sun rose over a country still buzzing. Not from scandal, but from something far rarer. Shared reflection. Senator Kennedy's words had traveled far beyond the summit walls. News anchors quoted him. Students debated his message in classrooms. Tech firms held emergency town halls, not to protect their brands, but to ask uncomfortable questions. Who have we pushed aside without realizing? Who's been left waiting at the door of a future we promised would be for everyone? But the real change didn't start in boardrooms. It started in living rooms, on sidewalks, inside coffee shops where strangers paused to talk about something other than likes, views, or downloads. An older man in Ohio said he was finally going to attend his granddaughter's coding showcase, even if he didn't understand the tech. A mother in San Diego wrote an open letter to her son's school, asking why the library kiosk didn't have a human helper anymore. A high school teacher in Kansas printed Kennedy's quote and taped it above her classroom door. Make sure the future has a front door everyone can walk through. Back in Louisiana, Kennedy returned home to a stack of handwritten letters, yes, actual letters, piled high on his desk. From veterans, farmers, small-town mayors, and teenagers. One read, "You reminded me I matter, even when the world tries to delete people like me." He didn't respond with press releases or social media posts. He wrote back, one by one. Meanwhile, the Access with Dignity initiative gained momentum. Libraries signed on first, pledging to train volunteers who could guide the elderly and tech-resistant through basic services. Then banks followed, promising real humans at help desks, not just QR codes taped to glass. Even rideshare apps began testing a new feature. Talk to a human now. A button. Simple. Powerful. And what about Elon? He didn't disappear. In fact, he leaned in, but differently this time. He announced the launch of a new advisory panel, not made of tech giants or influencers, but of ordinary citizens, teachers, veterans, retirees, and students like Alana. Their job? Review all future accessibility features and customer experiences across his companies. No branding, just feedback. Raw and real. At the panel's first meeting, someone asked Kennedy, who had agreed to co-chair, why he still chose to work with Elon after everything. He smiled softly and replied, "Because accountability without engagement is just punishment. If we want to change the system, we've got to stay in the room, even when the door almost shut us out." That line became a quote etched into the welcome plaque of the new Civic Tech and Humanity Center in Baton Rouge, funded not by political grants, but by grassroots donations and one unexpected check signed simply EM. The center became a gathering place, part community hall, part tech lab, part story archive. Every week, people from all walks of life came in to record their access story, a moment they felt seen or unseen in modern society. Some stories were heartbreaking, others were funny, but all of them together formed a living mirror of a culture learning how to humanize again. And as for Alana? She got a call from MIT, offering her a full scholarship. But she turned it down. "I want to stay here a little longer," she said, "to help build this center. I can always study systems, but right now I want to help fix one." By the time the year closed, the viral clip that started it all had been viewed over 100 million times. But no one remembered it just for the moment a senator was humiliated. They remembered what came next. They remembered the man who didn't shout, didn't sue, didn't storm social media with vengeance, but who stood taller than any algorithm and reminded the world of something we all forget. Dignity doesn't come from a title. It comes from how you treat people, especially when no one's watching. So now, if you're listening, if you've ever been ignored, dismissed, or overlooked, this story is for you. And if you've ever seen someone else be treated that way and did nothing, let this be your moment to change that. Comment below. Share your story. Ask a question. Lift someone up. Because respect is not a luxury, it's a responsibility, and the future will only belong to all of us if we build it that way. Together.